All right, here we are. I am so happy to be here. This is, I'm here in my basement, but I'm so happy to be in this virtual space with Kate, who I have to tell you this. I'm going to move my head a little bit. And if you see right there, Kate, I don't know, this is a card that you wrote to me. So
Yes,
Kate and her husband, Joe, were in my birth class over the summer. And after your birth, you wrote me one of the kindest, most encouraging notes I've ever gotten that just is part of me believing in the own work that I'm doing. And so among pictures of my family, I have this lovely card that
oh my
you
gosh.
wrote to me. So it was such an exciting thing for me when I started notice you telling your birth story on social media, and you agreed to be the first one to be on this Baby Jawn website telling a birth story. So you are, on one hand, you are Kate, who is a mother, but you are also Kate Jesuele of Bodywise Mama.
Jesuele.
Oh my gosh, you did it again. See, and we're not editing. I have this other problem, this amazing doula who I always have to ask people ahead of time and I still mess up. Kate Jesuele of Bodywise Mama. Don't get the Bodywise Mama part wrong, because you can find that on all the socials. And so we have a personal connection, but we also have this professional connection because I've had people in my class that are taking some of your prenatal strength training classes. So I'm really excited for people to get to hear from you as a person who went through birth and is now a mother, but also because you have some great insights, because you have such a great relationship with your body and you help other people in their relationships with their bodies. So I don't want to talk anymore. I want to give you the microphone to share with us about your birth story. I think that other people are going to find it so helpful, so encouraging, so empowering to hear the process that you went through. So the floor is yours, Kate Jesuele.
Yes, I actually really love the way you say my last name. You say it in a slightly different way than I do, and it just, I don't know, Jesuele. You soften that S. It sounds lovely and feminine. Well, my birth story really begins on this ball right here that I'm sitting on. So this ball is the ball that I sat on for my what ended up being a one-on-one class with you, childbirth education, like a one-day intensive. And so I feel like that really was like the starting point really for my birth journey. And so much of what you offered to us in that class came through like so powerfully and helpfully in the actual experience of labor. So labor for me started a few days after my due date, on September 10th. Is that right? September 10th, yes.
Of 2020.
Of 2020.
Because this has been its own year.
Yes. And this was my first labor and birth rodeo. So I had like nothing to really compare it to, but which made it hard to really explain how being pregnant in a pandemic and giving birth in a pandemic was so wild, because I had nothing to compare it to. And that's kind of a big takeaway just overall, like, for me with labor and birth, is that you really do rise to what's right in front of you. Mm-hmm. And when you are right in front of the thing that you sometimes fear the most or feel the most anxious about, it is much less dramatic or much less stressful, much less overwhelming, much less all the negative things that you were like throwing onto the situation that you were heading into.
Once like the monster under the bed or the monster in the closet.
Yes.
Oh, that's what you are. Yeah. Well, thank you. Because I tell people this, but you are affirming that it is true.
Yeah, there's like a demystifying that happens when you are going through this long, often very long, arduous journey. And it's always going to be, it's always going to include pain. It's always going to include disruptions to your, expectations or your aspirations. But I will say that, be like, having gone through it, I can now say on the other side that, anything that I was having anxiety about, anticipating, and leading up to birth starting for me, which was by induction, which was something that I feared and avoided. Mentally was fearing and avoiding. So like right off the bat, there was this circumstance that was thrust upon me where I was like, well, what can I do but just move through this one step at a time? And the interesting thing about the timing of my induction is that my water had broken about 36 hours before. And my water breaking didn't happen in like a huge gush dramatically. Like it was like this little pop of, fluid that came out, and then it kind of trickled out. The amniotic fluid just kept kind of trickling out throughout, very slowly throughout the day. And I was on this ball that I'm sitting on a lot, just trying to like roll and get things going. And I thought I was feeling like, occasionally throughout those 36 hours, I would feel like something is starting to happen, but like it would never pan out. So any kind of contraction that I would feel would maybe intensify a little bit, but then it would be hours before I would feel like a little something, close to what I could deem early labor even. So I was very confused. The first 36 hours of labor for me was sort of like false labor, but I was like, is this, questioning a lot, and really being in my head about it. But I, again, did all the things that I could do. I played the music that got my body like moving in these really sensual ways. And I, shut the door to our bedroom. My husband was actually like in the other room across from our bedroom, like working as much as he could to try to just like tie up all the loose ends, knowing that like, okay, something was happening. And he was really relying on me to be telling him the information. Like, I think it's time, or, oh, okay, something's definitely developing here towards, real substantial labor. But because it was like this very stop and go thing, I was finding it very difficult to even like give him information so that he could even know what was going on. So the idea of laboring at home was like right off the bat, like a very confusing and like, uncertain experience, which is not what I was expecting. I thought like, I would have like my water would break, like contractions would start, and I would just be in this like, progressive groove, and that we would hit our, I think it was you had coached us through, or coached us towards deciding when to go to the hospital at a certain point, when contractions were happening at a certain time frame. I think it was like
Does it have like a 411 or 321?
A 321 is what we were going for.
Yeah.
So I was like, I don't know what's that, these contractions, I can't even like, I have the timer, I'm trying to, time them, but I don't even know if what I'm feeling is an actual contraction. And I've been told by both Elizabeth and like every other mother in my life that you'll know. And like, I was just waiting for that knowing sense. And it just didn't come. But I tried to just stay in a space of like trust that, I would receive that signal from my body. So the next day I already had an appointment scheduled for a checkup. So as I said, 36 hours after my water breaking, we went in with all of our bags packed. We went to the doctor. And so we live in South Jersey now, in Colinsgwood, and we gave birth. I delivered at Pennsylvania Hospital, which is not far distance wise, but we were like, we're just gonna go prepared, as prepared as possible for a possible admission to the hospital. And so when I got checked, the midwife saw that my water had in fact broken, but that I was not dilated at all, but she could spot some meconium upon that cervical exam. That first cervical exam, I just want to say, was very painful, very jarring. And so that was also kind of like a start to labor that had really, was like a sharp edge that I felt like I was up against. So I had this really uncomfortable, painful cervical exam. And she pulled her, hand out of me and was like, there's meconium there. Your water broke. You're not dilated. We got to get this going. So I'm going to send you right over to be admitted. We're going to induce. And she was I had this midwife in prior checkups, and like we had this really great rapport, but she was so abrupt with me. And the whole thing changed, like the whole feeling that I had in that room, being with this person I was really familiar with and I had sort of an established rapport with, it just really threw me for a loop. So, she abruptly announced that I was being induced. There was no room for conversation about it. But I will say that, again, sort of going back to what I said about when the thing that you are fearing and avoiding the most is right in front of you, it does really shift a lot of that, like, oh my gosh, what will I do? How will I handle it? You just handle it. Yeah. You just, and it was like first lesson in motherhood really at that moment, which was like, I have new information. I have to instantly process it, and I need to move forward with some, like, in some way. But that walk from my doctor's office to the midwife to the hospital, which is like a 2-block walk, what you offered to me during my childbirth ed class was, if it's not an emergent situation and you don't need to rush, take your time entering in to the hospital. If you can, take a few deep breaths before you enter in to that hospital setting, which is, good, just, it's going to be a disruption to your flow, your show. Being in a hospital is going to be filled with a lot of disruptions to what you expected, what you hoped for, what it just kind of comes with the territory. You're going to be hooked up to things you didn't want to be hooked up to. You're going to be interrupted when you're trying to get some sleep. You're going to be in the middle of like dealing with something, and someone's going to come in to check your vitals, and you're going to have to, it's going to be a lot of that. So that 2-block walk was my opportunity to sort of like get back to center. Yeah. And I took my time. I was by myself, which could have been a negative. It could have been a drawback. It could be perceived as a hardship that I was without my husband there to really support me morally and emotionally through that, very jarring experience, which we also were very prepared for because we had packed our bags. Yeah. So in a sense, like, it was jarring, but we also were like entertaining it, that it could happen. So I took that 2-block walk and really, took some deep breaths just to drop back into my body and connect to my baby and speak to myself, and in doing so, speak to my baby in a way that was kind of bringing back a feeling of trust that I had, that was very easy for me to stay in at home. But I knew that I was going into an environment where, like, you know, my sense of trust might be a little, might be put to the test.
Yeah.
Might be put to the test. So by the time I got to the hospital in that 2-block walk, I had reunited with my husband. We walked in together, and I'll just skip ahead to the Pitocin Drip. So by 3 o'clock that afternoon on September 10th, my appointment for the checkup was at 1 o'clock. So by 1:30, I was checked into the hospital. By 3 o'clock, the Pitocin Drip had started. And I didn't realize that I wouldn't be able to eat solid foods with the Pitocin Drip. It didn't sort of, that wasn't something that I had thought about. So, and maybe somewhere along the lines I had heard that or knew that, but it just wasn't registering. And the midwife who was there at the time of my admission said, okay, we're gonna start within the next half an hour. We'll get you hooked up and we'll start the Pitocin Drip. And I said, just one thing, I haven't eaten anything since this morning. And I, as an aside, was approaching all of this also, not only like reclaiming and recentering myself on that 2-block walk, but I was like, I am an athlete. I am going to, I'm going to handle this like the toughest workout I've ever done. Yeah. I sort of put it into a framework that I could really get behind, that I could really rise to, and that really spoke to a part of my identity that's empowering. And so I thought, I got to fuel myself for this workout. I got to get myself ready. So I said, just a question about food. I haven't eaten anything since this morning. And she interrupted me and said, well, you can't eat salads with the Pitocin Drip. It's a clear liquid diet from here on out. She was like, I was like, you don't understand. I'm about to go into a workout. Yeah. Like, I need to fuel myself. She said, okay, in the next half an hour, if you have a small snack with you, like you can have something small. And I had some protein bars. So I like nibbled on a protein bar. And even if, I took 3 bites of that protein bar, it was not even about the actual like calories. It was about just like, I'm wearing my sports bra. Yeah. I'm taking in my protein. Yeah. I'm gonna like be strong and I'm gonna do this, gonna approach this like a workout. So it was really about the mental piece of like, I'm ready, getting ready. So the Pitocin Drip started and they were titrating it very gradually. And in fact, the first 3 levels up of the Pitocin Drip, I was almost looking forward to the contractions because I thought that's progress, like this is progress. Every contraction means like I'm dilating and like I'm getting closer to birthing my baby. And it was, by the second level up, I was really starting to feel like the pain register a little bit more. But even that level of pain was like still accessible to me to approach like a tough set of some kind of strength training exercise or cardio, like breathing through it and really allowing the pain to fully develop and riding the wave completely all the way through. And I was in this really beautiful flow for I don't even know hours wise, how many hours it was, but maybe let's say like for a good half of the 12 hours that, the first 12 hours of the Pitocin Drip, I would say for maybe the first 6, I was like, I felt like in charge. Yeah. And one of the nurses, because I was kind of moving into the overnight shift, the overnight nurse and midwife shift. And I went through like 3 different nurses. They just kept coming in and saying, oh, I'm reassigned to another patient or another set of patients. somebody's ready to give birth, I have to go, and you're going to be reassigned to this person. And that was a little frustrating because I would like establish a connection and then have to kind of establish another connection. And sometimes it felt like a natural connection and other times it didn't. But the at one point, I think they started, at level 2, and then it was level 4, and then level 6. And at level 6 of the Pitocin Drip, I was like, I think I'm ready for 8. I remember saying that to the nurse. I was like it's been going on long enough at level 6. Yeah. I was like, I'm really feeling these contractions now, and like it's getting a little harder to get through them, but I'm ready to push it, because again, I'm thinking like pain is progress. Yeah. And so they hadn't checked me at all at that point either. They hadn't checked my cervix. So they bumped me up to the level 8, and that was intense. And I think I stayed at the level 8 titration, whatever the dose that is, I don't know, but that was when it got really real. Like I was not really able to I wasn't able to talk during the contractions. It felt like I wasn't getting much of a break at all in between contractions. I just felt like the waves were like coming a little faster, and it was getting harder for me to even accept help physically. Like I remember doing like a lot of this to my husband. I remember like looking at him and just going like, say something, because he was like, he didn't know, like he was trying to sort of read my nonverbals. And so I think he was kind of he was going through his own process. Mm-hmm. And he's an internal processor. So he was like not really saying much, but he was just trying to sort of like hold me or hold the space nonverbally. And, that was an interesting moment. I was like, say something. And he was like, what do you want me to say? And he kind of like got mad at me. And then we both realized like, well, that's not like this. That's not going to fly. So, but it was hard for me in between contractions to really figure out like how to get through them, without, sometimes just dropping to my knees on the floor. These waves were really knocking me down a lot at that point. And I'm still in the mindset of allow it to fully develop, do whatever you can to like, trust that it's going to end. And even if the break doesn't feel like much, it's still a break. It's still something. You just get to that breath, get to that next breath that you can take in between the next wave that feels like it's coming right behind. So that was sort of the point at which I entered in really to this like other world almost, where like people were coming in and out of the room talking to me, and I was like not really able to process what they were saying. Or I kind of vaguely remember people being there, but like I was going in and out of like myself, the like deepest parts of myself. And they weren't scary parts. I remember feeling simultaneously like, overwhelmed by the pain, but being within myself during them, reassured. Like that place felt like a cocoon with, from which like I would eventually metamorphose. But like, I kind of was aware to some level that like, this was part of the process too, was like going into this cocooned place, and blocking out like other sounds, other people, other, even doing this to my husband, get away. I need to just kind of be within myself and completely cocooned for this moment, and then I'll come out of it for a second. But then something shifted. I think Lucas, my son, he shifted position, and I think he might have turned. I'm not 100% sure, but I went into back labor. It was like within one contraction, suddenly I was having back labor. And that was something that I just had a really that changed the game for me, was going into back labor. And at that point I was in the 11th hour of labor, and the contractions were coming very quickly, and it was back labor. So the midwife came in and said, I think it's time to maybe talk about, and again, this is in between contractions, which was, and I'm like, let me finish this contraction and then like maybe I can hear what you're saying. And she said, maybe it's time to talk about pain management, because you're this far in, you're at this level of pain. We're going to check you to see where you're at, because it looks like and seems like you are 8 centimeters dilated, like you're in active labor, you're, the level of pain that you're enduring. But you might have several more hours to go. So now would be the time to talk about an epidural or some other kind of pain management. And she said, and also before we even move forward with an epidural, we need to check your platelet count because it's low. And if it's at a certain level of low, you won't be eligible for an epidural. And if we need to move into a C-section, if it's at that low level, that lowest level, or out of range of an acceptable level, if we do a C-section, we will have to knock you out completely. You won't be able to be awake. So I'm dealing with back labor, and I'm being sent, these other sorts of waves of like information that I'm being asked to like have a conversation about. I mean, it seemed so unfair at that moment that like, it seemed unfair, but but I remember what you said about when pain becomes suffering. That is when to at least consider an epidural. Pain management in general, but like if the pain is in vain and it's not leading to progress, and you are enduring, just straight up you're just suffering. So that was another, nugget that that like came through, kind of cut through the narrative of like, this is so unfair and I'm overwhelmed and I can't, I'm like, whoa. And I remember when you said, that point came through, and I said to Joe, I'm suffering. I'm suffering. This is almost inhumane. I can't like, if I cannot have, if they check my platelet count where it is, and they come back to tell me that it's too low for an epidural and too low to be awake during a C-section, I am absolutely on board with just getting this baby out. Like enough is enough. At that point, I had sort of hit that place of enough is enough. And I didn't need this, but the nurse, Cecilia, and the midwife, Diane, at that point had both been in the room when I made the decision to, because by the way, the platelet count did end up coming back within normal range, which was a miracle. It wasn't even low, like it had gone up actually since the time that I had been admitted to the hospital. So that felt like just such a miracle. So we were able to move forward with the epidural, but they said to me, don't think for a second that you did not work your ass off for like we were here to witness it. So they were very validating in telling me that it wasn't giving up, and it wasn't a sign of weakness that I was taking this pain management, that I was taking the pain away. And I said, and this was so important for me to voice, I said, I think it's actually the bravest thing that I've done so far. For me, accepting help, accepting relief from pain actually feels like the bravest thing. And I don't know that they entirely got what I was saying, but I did. it was like a level of vulnerability that I was like entering into, that like I've gone far enough without help. And it's available to me by, miraculously.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take it. But they did check my cervix and I was 1 centimeter dilated.
Wow.
So that also fed into my decision to get the epidural. So I was like, it's going to be another, I don't even know how many hours of this. Like amazingly, from the point of getting the epidural, and it took effect almost instantly. And that was a weird experience to not be able to have voluntary control of my legs. That was weird, but I was able to sleep for a bit. I was able to rest, and within like 4 hours, my body just responded to the Pitocin drip that continued in a state of rest.
Yeah.
And so that was a miraculous shift for me as well, perspective wise, that I didn't even know I was asking for or needing, but it really delivered some wisdom, that experience leading up to the epidural being available to me. That was a very pivotal moment. But I will say that because Lucas was ready to be born for so many hours, he was ready before I was ready to, before my cervix was relaxed enough to dilate, which is another like takeaway. Before I was relaxed enough for my cervix to dilate, he was like, hitting a solid wall, trying to be born for hours, days, maybe. And so by the time I got to 8 centimeters dilated and I had 2 centimeters to go, he was under a lot of stress and he was distressed, and his heart rate was decelerating on every contraction. And I write about this on one of my Instagram posts, so I won't kind of go into it too much here because the details are kind of available somewhere else. But the nurse, Cecilia, she had been so vigilant of both he and I during the time that I had the epidural, and it was able to sleep. And I would just sort of like, I was in and out of sleep for hours, and I would wake up and I'd look over and there would be Cecilia just watching like a hawk me on the monitor and the baby on the monitor. And she would look at me and see that I was up, and she would say, "Are you in any pain? How about now?" She was watching my contractions and making sure I wasn't feeling anything, I was like, "Nope, I don't feel anything. I'm totally fine," And so I was fine. The baby, Lucas, he was having some difficulty on those really intense contractions. And so they called, the midwife said, "Let me call the attending in just to, confer." And it was these 3 females surrounding my monitors, and they're all going, "Yeah, looks pretty straightforward to me that like we need to move on this." And they were saying it so calmly, but so that was also another like eye-opening experience, was to watch medical professionals confer about something that felt very stressful and like tense for me, but they just kept this demeanor of like, "Yeah, we're gonna have to move on this. It seems pretty straightforward. We got to make a decision, take some actions sooner rather than later." And the midwife looked at me and she said, "At this point, we are moving towards a C-section." And this was another moment of being able to voice in a moment that could have felt disempowering and like demoralizing, and it was that too. I was so close, I was so close. And I wanted to plead for my body, like give my body a little more time. It'll get there. It will get to 10 centimeters and everything's going to be okay. And I'll be able to birth this baby out. But I looked at her and I said, "I know," very calmly, kind of met her in that energy of like, this is a tense, disheartening situation, but like, I know, I understand what's going on. And even if I was also feeling those other things, just voicing a confident, empowered response to another medical professional was like a game changer.
Yeah.
It was, because I think that historically my reaction or my response to tense, feeling like I'm being pushed into a corner kind of moments, and I don't have a choice, is to cry, is to just, okay, and like sort of have the like, oh, woe is me. And I made a conscious choice to voice I understand what's going on, I know. And I nodded, like I'm on board with whatever it takes to keep all of us safe. But then Nurse Cecilia said, I have an idea. Let's see if we cut the Pitocin, how the baby responds with a break.
Yeah.
Because I've been watching him and I think that he'll be resilient. I think that he'll rebound.
Mm-hmm.
And again, miraculously, she spoke with, I think, such like confidence and had said, I've been the one watching the patients here all night long. I know best. And I think this is going to be a good strategy. And so the attending physician and the midwife both agreed. And within a couple of hours of being off of the Pitocin, and then restarting it, Lucas rebounded. He was able to really kind of stay steady throughout the contractions at that point. He got some rest. Mm-hmm. And then once the Pitocin drip started back up, slowly building back up to that level 8 or whatever, level 10, whatever it was, to push my body to dilate for the last 2 centimeters, it happened very quickly again. And I, strangely enough, even with an epidural, like I could feel that shift to tense. I said to the midwife, I think you need to check me. I think I'm ready. I feel like something just shifted. And she said, maybe. And I was like, okay. You're saying maybe, and I'm saying like, I know I'm ready. And she checked me. She said, yeah, like you are in fact ready, like 10 centimeters. And I was able to, in the end, avoid a C-section and push my baby out. She said, it's a good thing you are fit and that you are like, you have that like athlete mindset, because we need to get this baby out. And so you got to push with everything you got. And I pushed in a position I was not anticipating with my knees pulled back. I had always, kind of, I sort of was in the mindset that was not the best way to push.
Yeah. And
she said, no, it is the best way to push. And again, it was one of those moments of like, all right, I'm ready to push. I'm going to trust that you know what you're doing. So my husband held one knee back. The nurse held the other knee back. And I was able to feel enough of my upper abs that I was able to like crunch my baby out. Mm-hmm. Some abdominal crunches. And the other interesting thing about pushing that I did not know was going to be asked of me was to hold my breath during the push. So just a little, everyone's birth experience will be different. Mm-hmm. But for me, that was unexpected, that she would say not to exhale on the push, but to take a deep breath in, hold, push, and then exhale after the push. That was an interesting flip of the script on pushing. But yeah, it was 20 minutes of power pushing. Wow. And I did change positions once. They had me on my side once, and then they brought me back to knees pulled back. But I did ask, I said, can I like hold on to the squat bar or something? Can I be creative with my positions that I'm pushing it as much as I can with an epidural? And that's when she said, no, like we're going to do this the most efficient way. We're going to pull the knees back. You're going to push. Like that's the way that we're going to do this. So I conceded on that and just went into myself and used all the resources that I had left available to feel. Yeah. I'm
going to pause really quickly. All right, we're back. Please pick up where you left off.
Yeah. So the other thing that happened right after birth that I was fearing and avoiding was that I wouldn't be able to have Lucas on me right away, skin to skin, instant. And then he would latch right away and all of that. So I was trying, I wanted that experience. I was aspiring to have that experience, but because of the distress that he was under during labor and that there was meconium found, that he had pooped inside of the womb, they needed to give him an exam and check him for any meconium, and also check his vitals and everything before bringing him back over to me. So, and I also had a tear, an internal tear that was being looked at by not only my midwife who delivered the baby, delivered Lucas, but also she had to call in like another physician to look at it. So that was going on, which I couldn't feel. I couldn't feel any of that, but I was hearing and seeing like a lot of activity right immediately after giving birth. That was a little like alarming, because she said, okay, like trying to stay calm, like I'm going to call this other physician in just to take a look. I want to make sure that the tear didn't go all the way through to your rectum. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to just let you do your thing. And I'm going to wait for my baby to come back over to me. So I was just feeling a little exposed right after birth. But the other thing is when I finally got Lucas back on me, which really wasn't that long, it was really a few minutes apart from him. It took me a while to bond with him. Yeah. And I don't know that it was in part due to the epidural, the Pitocin Drip. I don't know. I'm not sure like what was going on there, but what came as a surprise that I would love to offer to your listeners too and your viewers is to allow for and take as much time, maybe more than what you expected, to bond with your baby. Right after birth, that it might not feel so instant. Yeah. And the other thing I think that plays into that is you don't always know how depleted you actually are after labor. Yeah. There's this adrenaline rush and crash that happens for sure, but it's hard to quantify how depleted you actually are because you were just doing whatever you needed to do. I mean, it was, labor can be days long, multiple days of labor. And yet it goes by in the end. It's like this flash. Yeah. That culminates in a literal flash of your baby being born. This bright light comes out, screaming. And there's, all this joy and all this, and while I was pushing him also, they asked if I wanted to reach down because I was apparently I was a very efficient pusher. And so the first few pushes were really strong and effective. So very soon after pushing, I was able to actually reach down and feel all his hair. They asked if I wanted to reach down, and that just that was an amazing moment that started the hormonal cascade of bonding, or that sort of amplified or accelerated maybe the hormonal cascade there for bonding. But once I had him on me, I was deliriously tired and did not have the faculties to even connect or quantify how tired I was. And so holding him and trying to nurse him, and having all that activity of like repairing this tear, and like the midwife just looked up at me and said, you'll probably want to get some physical therapy for this after. And I'm like, okay, I'll do that when the time comes. Yeah. But it did plant a seed, I will say. And I did eventually get some postpartum physical therapy, which I also recommend. But that's a piece I wanted to like leave everyone with, was when all is said and done and you've birthed your baby, you've delivered your baby, however that unfolds, it is absolutely okay to not feel like, you're ready for this.
Yeah.
And simultaneously, like, okay, here I am.
Yeah.
You're instantly a mother. You're instantly dependent on for sustaining this life. And, you know, I was also very fortunate to have a very strong, motivated breastfeeder, my son. So, you know, that went pretty smoothly, the latching and the nursing. And, but I just remember feeling a bit of a disconnect for maybe the first 12 hours or so after birth. I would say in the overnight hours at the hospital, I started to kind of like maybe having some rest, a little bit of rest, coming down off of the, getting the feeling back in my legs.
Yeah.
Like being able to actually walk, you know, there is that body mind connection piece, you know? And so I think that especially if you have an epidural or if you had a C-section, like there might be a delay in how you're able to kind of really feel connected and bonded with your baby.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean really anything other than your body just needs
time.
Your body and your mind need a chance to reintegrate.
Yeah. Yeah. That's such a helpful way to think about it. Yeah. I love it. I love that.
So much more I could say.
Yeah. Well,
So much
I know
more I could say, but we'll stop there.
you have some of the details you've shared, because what caught my attention is sharing on your social media, because you really, you offer like prenatal strength training. You offer classes, all this village for women, pregnant people to prepare for birth by preparing their bodies ahead of time. But it really is this, it's more than just helping people with their bodies. You're creating this space for people to think about wholeness and wellness, and that mind body connection. So I hope people will jump on, follow you on social media. From that, they can figure out also when your virtual classes, because everything's virtual, which means anybody anywhere who sees this that would just love to learn from you has the opportunity to not just follow you on social media, but actually take some of those prenatal strength classes strength training classes, which people rave about all the time. When people are in my class, they talk about other either yoga classes or different things they're doing. And it's different than a yoga class because it's focused much more on digging into the athletic part of yourself. Like you said,
that was huge. That was a huge component of my labor and birth story.
Yeah.
That persona.
Yeah.
Did really help.
Yeah.
Did really help at tough moments.
I think there's so many people that feel like they didn't realize they needed to connect with that part of themselves as a pregnant person. And then it helps them so much as a birthing person, as a parent as well, because of all the ways that you use your body and how you want to have good, you want to have good body mechanics and strength for all the tasks that are a part of taking care of a little human.
Yeah.
Well, I feel so fortunate that I knew of you professionally before I had this honor of getting to know you through doing birth classes together, and that we have your story now to add to this collection of this virtual village where people can come, and I think people are going to gain strength and encouragement, and these little nuggets, as you said, the things that you remembered when the time was right, that people are hearing that in your story. So it gets a chance for them when they have their own birth to think about recalling those things in a really helpful way. So
I sincerely hope so.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And
thank you.
Yeah. And maybe we'll get you in on a parenting story as things develop and as you explore and develop as a parent and go on this journey. I would love to have you come back and tell us some of your best Philly style parenting stories. So you totally count as Philly. We have absorbed that anything, like if you can get there quicker than you can get to King of Prussia, then it counts as Philly, even if it's in New Jersey. So
there's a whole South Philly migration to Colinsgwood.
Yeah.
That is like very, very, there's a very strong South Philly vibe in Colinsgwood.
Yeah.
Lots of really like a lot of family run Italian restaurants and from families from South Philly that
awesome
opened businesses here in the Colinsgwood area. So, yep, Philly, always in my heart and in my spirit for sure.
Awesome.
But thank you so much for having me on today and allowing me to share.
Thank you.
Have a beautiful day.